Welcome occultists to a new video. I am experimenting with longer formats, with more stories for you all to enjoy. Let me know if you'd like to see more. For now, sit back and experience these disturbing ghost stories. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more scary stories. When I was in college, I worked part-time as a security guard. Mostly boring night shifts at empty offices, storage facilities, stuff like that. Easy money. One night, my boss offered me a fill-in gig. A shift at St. Augustine Hospital, an abandoned hospital on the edge of town. The place had been shut down since the late 90s after a fire destroyed part of the East Wing. Now it was just a condemned shell, scheduled for demolition later that year. My job was simple. Walk the grounds once every hour, make sure no one was trespassing, report anything suspicious. Sounded easy enough. But no one told me about the crying room. It was a cold night. No moon, just thick, low-hanging clouds. I parked behind the building, radioed into dispatch, and started my first walkthrough. The hospital was even creepier inside than I expected. Peeling paint, rusted gurneys, scattered paperwork frozen in time. Every sound echoed off the tile floors. My footsteps. The groan of the wind through broken windows. The whole place smelled like mildew and old metal. I stuck to the west wing at first, staying away from the burned-out east side. Halfway through my second lap, I heard it. Faint at first. Crying. Coming from somewhere deeper inside. High-pitched. Childlike. It was so soft, for a second I thought it was just the wind, but it grew louder the closer I got to the old maternity ward. I radioed in. Protocol, anytime you hear a disturbance. Dispatch told me to check it out, but not to engage with anyone. Just report. I pushed open the double doors marked maternity. The air was colder here, and the crying was definitely coming from somewhere ahead. The hallway stretched in both directions. Most of the doors were closed, old room numbers still hanging crookedly. One stood out. Room 209. Its door was wide open, and a dim, sickly light flickered inside. I approached slowly. The crying grew louder. I stepped inside. The room was empty except for an old crib against the far wall, covered in ash and grime. But as soon as I crossed the threshold, the crying stopped. Silence crushed the air. The light went out. I backed out fast, heart pounding. I didn't see anyone, didn't hear anyone, but I felt it, like I was being watched. Back in the hallway, I slammed the door to 209 shut. Something caught my eye. Written across the door in soot-blackened letters. Never stop crying. I hadn't noticed it when I walked in. That should have been enough for me to leave. But I didn't, because I saw something else. Fresh footprints, small, bare, leading away from room 209 down the hallway, into the burned-out east wing. And they were wet, leaving little puddles with every step. I told myself it had to be some prank. Maybe local kids sneaking in. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I followed those footprints, I wouldn't be chasing anyone. I finished the shift without going near the east wing again. The next night, I was scheduled again. I thought about calling out. But money was money. Everything was quiet for the first hour. But just after midnight, the crying started again. Louder this time. More urgent. Almost angry. I decided to check the cameras before doing another patrol. The hospital had a few old security cams still working, hooked up to a grainy black and white monitor at the guard station. Flipping through the feeds, I caught a glimpse of something. Room 209. The door was open again. And inside? A figure. Small. Standing in the crib. Facing the wall. I leaned closer to the screen. The figure slowly turned its head toward the camera. No eyes, just black, empty sockets, and a mouth wide open crying silently. The monitor flickered, and the figure was gone. I grabbed my flashlight and sprinted down the hallway. Something in me screamed not to go, but I couldn't leave it alone. I reached the maternity ward. Room 209's door swung on its hinges. Inside, the crib was tipped over. Deep scratch marks raked across the walls and scrawled above the crib in something dark and dripping. She never left. That was enough. I ran back to the guard station and called dispatch. Told them I was done. I was pulling out of the parking lot when I glanced up at the hospital windows. Room 209. Someone was standing there, watching, small, still, crying. I didn't go back. A few weeks later, I asked one of the older guards about St. Augustine. He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to talk. Finally, he told me the story. In 1998, just before the hospital closed, a nurse named Delaney had a breakdown. One night, she smothered a newborn in the maternity ward. They said she kept saying, "I'll be your mother. You'll never be alone." When they tried to arrest her, she set fire to the east wing and disappeared into the blaze. They never found her body, but people said you could still hear the baby crying, trapped, waiting for her to come back. Sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I think I hear it again, software insistent, a crying that starts low and builds. And once I swear, I saw a small, wet footprint on my backseat floor, even though the doors were locked, even though no one was there. Some places shouldn't be watched over. Some things don't want to be found, especially if they never stop crying. Last year, I moved into a small rental house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just me, some furniture I barely managed to scrape together, and a fresh start after a messy breakup. The house was old, but it had character. Slanted floors, tiny closets, creaky windows. I figured the noises at night were just part of the charm. I didn't think much about the attic. It had one of those pull-down ladders in the hallway ceiling. I never even opened it. Had no reason to. Until I started noticing the mirror. There was a mirror mounted on the hallway wall. One of those cheap full-body mirrors you find at thrift stores. Ugly brass frame, warped glass. The first few nights, I'd catch my reflection looking wrong. Not scary wrong. Just off. Like my posture was different. Or my hands were at slightly different angles than they should have been. I chalked it up to bad glass and bad lighting. Until one night, coming back from a late shift, I walked past the mirror, and I swear I saw someone else, standing behind me. I spun around. Empty hallway. I told myself it was sleep deprivation, but the next night, the attic door was open, just a crack. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't touched it. No drafts in the house. No one else had a key. I grabbed a broom and pushed the door closed from a distance. It slammed harder than I expected. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Something thudded inside the attic, like footsteps. I barely slept that night. The next day, I bought a cheap battery-powered security camera and aimed it right at the attic door. If it opened again, I'd catch it. That night, I kept waking up, checking the feed. Nothing. Until 3:17 a.m. The camera's motion sensor went off. The feed showed the attic door swinging down slowly, silently, and something stepped down. I couldn't see its face, just a tall, thin figure, barefoot, moving strangely, like it wasn't used to walking. It stood in the hallway for a long time, facing the mirror. Not me. The mirror. Then it slowly climbed back into the attic and pulled the door closed behind it. I left the house the next morning and stayed with a friend. I didn't even go back to pack a bag. I was terrified. But curiosity got the better of me. 2 days later, I returned in broad daylight, friends in tow. We pulled down the attic ladder. I climbed up slowly, heart hammering. The attic was mostly empty, just old insulation, broken furniture, and a heavy smell of dust and rot. In the far corner, someone had nailed a cracked, dirty mirror to one of the beams, facing inward, and on the wall beside it, carved into the wood, were words, "Watch yourself." I moved out that day, lost my deposit, didn't care. But that's not the end of it, because last week I moved into a new place across town. No attic, no creepy mirrors. Or so I thought. 2 nights ago, coming home from work, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. A mirror in my bedroom that I never remembered unpacking. Same ugly brass frame, same warped glass. When I looked into it, for a split second I saw him again, standing behind me, smiling. And in the reflection, the ceiling behind me had a pull-down attic door. Even though my ceiling was flat. Even though there's no attic here. Now, every night around 3:17 a.m., the mirror fogs up. And when it clears, I can see faint footprints forming behind me, slowly getting closer. I tried throwing the mirror out. I smashed it into pieces. I even burned it. But it came back somehow. It was hanging on the wall with no nail or hook, as if it hovering and glued to the wall. Some nights I hear the creak of a ladder being pulled down, even though there's no ladder, no attic, no second floor, just me and the man in the mirror, smiling wider every night. I don't know what he wants. I don't think he's human. All I know is that every night, when the mirror fogs, I pray he doesn't step all the way through. Because when he does, there won't be a reflection anymore. There'll just be him. I had been visiting a friend across town, and by the time I left her place, it was almost midnight. My car had been acting up lately, so I figured I'd save the trouble and just catch the late bus back to my side of town. The route wasn't busy at night. Half the stops were practically ghost towns. The night was cold, and the sky was heavy with dark clouds. I stood under the flickering streetlight at the bus stop, shivering, staring down the empty street. Everything felt too quiet. The app said the next bus would arrive at 12:09 a.m. When I finally saw the headlights cutting through the darkness, I breathed a little easier. That was a mistake. The bus hissed to a stop in front of me. It looked old, older than the buses I usually saw. Faded paint, cracked windows. The number on the front wasn't lit up. Still, it opened its doors. I hesitated for a second. Then the driver leaned toward the windshield and smiled. It was a huge, unnatural grin. Too many teeth. Too wide. But it was late. It was cold. And I told myself I was just being paranoid. I climbed aboard. Inside, the bus smelled like mildew and iron. The overhead lights buzzed weakly, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. I looked around. The seats were mostly empty, except for a few passengers, or at least, I thought they were passengers. They didn't move, didn't look up. Their heads hung low, faces hidden by hoods or hats. Each sat perfectly still, hands resting in their laps. The only sound was the engine rumbling. I made my way to the middle of the bus, sat down, and pulled out my phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi, no GPS, just a blinking searching message. The driver pulled away from the curb without saying a word. For a few minutes, it was normal. I stared out the window, watching the empty streets pass by. But soon, I noticed something strange. The bus wasn't following the normal route. We passed intersections I didn't recognize. The streetlights grew fewer and farther between, until we were driving down dark, cracked asphalt roads, lined with crumbling buildings. And the passengers. They started to move, but not naturally. One at a time, their heads would snap upward in sharp, jerky motions, like broken marionettes. And every time a head snapped up, the bus would jolt, lurching harder, faster down the road. I wanted to get off. I pulled the stop cord. Nothing happened. No ding. No flashing stop requested light. The driver didn't even glance back. I stood up about to approach him when a voice rasped behind me. "You can't get off until you're chosen." I spun around. The nearest passenger, a man in a tattered suit, had his head twisted at an unnatural angle, staring at me with wide, empty eyes. His mouth didn't move, but the words echoed inside my head. I stumbled back to my seat, heart hammering. The bus kept driving. Minutes, maybe hours passed. It was impossible to tell. The windows were black now. No reflections, no outside lights, just endless darkness pressing against the glass. I clutched the seat in front of me, trying not to scream. Then the driver spoke for the first time. His voice was wrong, like a tape played too slow. "Next stop, end of the line." The bus slowed. Through the window, I saw a faint orange glow ahead. Another bus stop, in the middle of nowhere. Standing under the flickering light was a woman. She was facing away from us, her dress soaked, hair hanging in thick dripping strands. As we pulled up, she turned around. Her face was hollow, like someone had scooped it out and left just a gaping wet hole where her mouth and nose should be. The bus doors hissed open. She climbed aboard, sat down 2 rows behind me, and began whispering. I couldn't understand the words, but every syllable made my skin crawl. The bus started moving again, and the passengers, they started changing. Their faces began to sag, melting into those same hollow, empty shapes, one by one. I tried not to look, tried to close my eyes. But when I opened them again, the woman was sitting in the seat across from me, staring, her whispers growing louder. The driver's voice crackled over the intercom again. "One must stay behind. One must carry the road." The bus screeched to a halt. The doors swung open. Beyond them was an endless stretch of cracked pavement, disappearing into darkness. The driver turned in his seat for the first time. His face was wrong, not a human face at all. It looked like wet clay, barely shaped into something almost human. And he pointed at me. "It's your turn." I bolted, shoved past the passengers who didn't react, and stumbled out the doors. The road under my feet felt too soft, like wet sand. I ran, didn't look back, ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. When I finally dared to glance over my shoulder, the bus was gone. The road was gone. Just darkness. Endless, hungry darkness. Somehow, I made it back. I woke up on the side of a highway the next morning, covered in mud and scratches. No one believed my story. The bus company said no route runs that late. Police found no evidence I was ever picked up. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night, I'll spot a flicker of headlights in my rearview mirror. No bus number, no passengers. Just a driver with too many teeth. And if I ever stop, I'm not sure I'll get to leave again. About 2 years ago, I was traveling cross-country for work, and because of some bad weather, I had to stop overnight in a small town in Oklahoma. I didn't want to spend much, so I booked the cheapest motel I could find on short notice, the Maple Rest Inn. It was old, bare bones, The kind of place you check into and immediately think about sleeping on top of the sheets instead of under them. But it was late, I was tired, and I figured it was just one night. They gave me room 306, top floor, corner room. At the time, I didn't know the history of the place. If I had, I would have slept in my car. The room was exactly what you'd expect. A rattling heater, cigarette burns on the carpet, a flickering overhead light. I dumped my bag on the chair, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the bed. That's when I noticed the suitcase, sitting on the other bed across the room. Old brown leather, with tarnished brass buckles. It didn't belong to me. I stared at it for a minute, wondering if housekeeping had forgotten to clear it out. Maybe someone had stayed here earlier and the room hadn't been properly cleaned. I didn't want to touch it, but curiosity got the better of me. I stepped over and popped the latches open. Inside were clothes. Men's clothes. Neatly folded but dusty, like they hadn't been touched in years. Underneath the clothes was a stack of papers, yellowed newspaper clippings, photos, and a black notebook. The headlines made my stomach twist. Man found dead in room 306. Authorities baffled. Motel staff speak out. Room cursed. Third death linked to mysterious room. Every article mentioned room 306. The man in the photos looked ordinary enough. Middle-aged, dark hair, wearing a flannel shirt in most of the pictures. Always smiling. Until I reached the last photo. It was taken inside this room. Same ugly curtains, same two beds. The man was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the camera. Except his smile was wrong. Too wide, too stiff. Like his face was being pulled by invisible strings. His eyes were completely black. No pupils, no whites. Just empty sockets. I slammed the suitcase shut and pushed it against the wall. I told myself it was a prank. Some elaborate setup to scare guests. Maybe a viral marketing thing for a local haunted house. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I tried to sleep anyway. At around 2:13 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the suitcase snapping open. I sat bolt upright, heart racing. In the dim glow from the parking lot lights outside, I could just barely make out the shape of the suitcase on the floor. Wide open. And the papers were scattered across the carpet. I grabbed my bag and decided right then to leave. As I threw my things together, I noticed something new on the bed across the room. A small tape recorder. Old-fashioned. Bulky. The kind you had to press physical buttons on. It wasn't there when I checked in. Next to it, a slip of paper. Press play. I should have left. I know that now. But I pressed play. The tape crackled to a life. And a man's voice, hoarse, desperate, came through. If you're hearing this, don't sleep. Don't let it take you. Stay awake until morning. Whatever you do, don't look in the mirror. The tape ended with a loud thud, like the recorder had been dropped. At that exact moment, the bathroom light flickered on. I hadn't touched the switch, and the mirror inside the bathroom? It was facing the door, reflecting the room perfectly. I crept to the door, eyes locked on the mirror. In the reflection, I saw myself. And standing right behind me, the man from the suitcase photos, smiling, black eyes, stretching an arm out toward me. I turned to run. Nothing there. I didn't even bother trying to pack up the rest of my stuff. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the door, down 3 flights of stairs, and into the parking lot. As I reached my car, I glanced back at the motel. All the rooms were dark, except room 306. The curtains fluttered, and for a split second, I swear I saw him standing at the window, smiling. I drove until sunrise without stopping, never went back for my things. Later, I did some digging. Found out that 3 separate guests had died in room 306 over the past decade. No signs of struggle, no signs of forced entry. Each one had been found sitting on the bed, smiling, eyes black as tar. The motel never officially listed room 306 as haunted, just under renovation most of the time. Locals say the first death was the man in the photographs, a drifter, checked in under a fake name. They say he hung himself in the bathroom, but when they found him, he was sitting upright on the bed, smiling. I still see him sometimes, in the rearview mirror, in windows I pass at night. Always just a glimpse, always smiling. And sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I hear a soft click, like an old tape recorder starting up, and a whisper in the dark. Press play. Some doors should stay closed, some rooms should stay empty, and some warnings are too late to listen to. It started with a simple trip to the flea market. I wasn't looking for anything special, maybe a few vintage records, a cool lamp for my apartment, but then I saw it, tucked away on a dusty table between cracked porcelain dolls and rusted silverware. An old picture frame. It was ornate, heavy, made of tarnished brass, with intricate vines curling around the edges. The kind of craftsmanship you don't really see anymore. No cracks, no obvious damage. It was surprisingly cheap too, $5. The seller, an old man, with yellowed eyes and paper-thin skin, said nothing when I handed him the money. He just smiled. I should have walked away. I took it home and placed it on my nightstand. At first, I didn't even put a photo in it. I figured I'd find something later. For a while, it just sat there, empty, catching the soft afternoon light. But after a few days, I noticed something strange. When I walked past the frame at certain angles, it didn't look empty. It looked like there was something inside. Just a shadow at first. A dark blur, like a smudge on glass. I thought maybe it was my reflection catching weird in the warped surface, until the shadow started to change. One night, I came home late and flicked on the bedroom light. I glanced at the frame and froze. There, clear as day, was a photograph inside it. It wasn't one I put there. It showed a blurry, dim image of my bedroom, the very room I was standing in, taken from a low angle, like someone had been crouching in the corner. I stepped closer. The details were grainy, but unmistakable. My bed, my desk, the crumpled hoodie on the floor. And in the doorway, just barely visible, a figure, tall, thin, with long arms, and a face blurred into a sickly white smear. I ripped the frame off the nightstand and shook it. Nothing. Just glass. No slot in the back to slide a photo in. No way to open it. The picture was inside the glass. Burned into it. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the picture changed again. Now the figure was closer, standing just beside the bed, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if studying the spot where I usually slept. I turned the frame around to face the wall, tried to forget it. The nightmare started soon after. Always the same. I'm lying in bed, frozen, unable to move. The figure crawls out of the corner, moving on all fours like a spider, limbs bending the wrong way. It gets closer and closer, until its face is inches from mine. A blank mask of skin. No eyes, no mouth, just flesh. Breathing, watching. I tried throwing the frame away. I wrapped it in a towel, smashed it with a hammer. The glass cracked, but didn't break. No matter how hard I hit it, it stayed intact. That night, when I returned from the dumpster, the frame was back on my nightstand. Picture updated. Now the figure stood over me while I slept, one hand reaching out. Desperate, I covered it with a blanket, shoved it into a drawer, and duct taped it shut. Still, every morning, I found it sitting back on the nightstand, waiting, smiling. Yes, smiling now. A faint slit carved across the blank face, curling upward. And something new appeared in the photo. Words. Scratched into the floorboards at the foot of my bed. Let me in. I reached out to a local paranormal group. They didn't even want to come over once they heard the story. One woman, a supposed medium, said frames like that were anchors, traps for entities that couldn't fully enter our world without an invitation. The more you looked, the more you believed, the stronger they got. "Don't acknowledge it," she warned. "Whatever you do, don't speak to it. Don't interact." Too late. That night, I woke up to the sound of scratching. Slow, deliberate, from under the bed. I stayed perfectly still, heart pounding in my chest. The scratching continued for what felt like hours. I couldn't move, couldn't even scream. When the sun finally started to rise, the sound stopped. I climbed out of bed on trembling legs, and I saw it. The floorboards were scratched raw and carved into the wood clear as day. "You looked! You know me now!" The frame sat on my pillow. The picture inside now showed me, standing at the window, staring out into the street. Only, I hadn't left the bed all night. I don't live there anymore. I left everything behind. New city, new apartment, new everything. I don't even own any mirrors anymore. But last week, walking past a pawn shop downtown, I saw it, sitting in the front window display. The same ornate brass frame, empty, waiting. And as I passed just for a second, I saw a reflection in the glass. Not mine. A blank face, smiling, and a whisper in the back of my mind. "Let me in. You can smash your mirrors. You can move away. You can try to forget. But once you see it, it always knows where to find you." Everyone in my town knew about the Sunday house. It sat at the end of a cracked dirt road on the outskirts, abandoned for decades. An old Victorian house with a crooked steeple, boarded up windows, and black rot creeping up its walls. They said it used to be a preacher's home back in the 1920s. A man who went insane and cursed the town before disappearing without a trace. The story was the same every Halloween. Some dumb teenagers would dare each other to break in, try to spend the night. No one ever lasted more than a few hours. Some came out crying. Others refused to talk about what they saw. I never believed any of it. Until the night I went inside. It was a cold Sunday night in October. Perfect, we thought, for a little thrill. My friends Chris, Tyler, and Jess dared me to go into the Sunday house alone. Said I had to stay inside for an hour. Easy money, $50 each if I made it. Stupidly, I agreed. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed the rotting porch steps. The front door was barely hanging on its hinges. I pushed it open, the wood groaning like it hadn't been touched in 100 years. The smell hit me first. Wet mold, rusted metal, something sharp and sour underneath. I stepped inside. The floorboards sagged under my weight. The flashlight barely cut through the darkness. Old, crumbling furniture was scattered around. Broken chairs, a torn-up sofa, a fireplace filled with ash. But what caught my eye was the wall across the living room. Handwritten sermons, covering every inch. Bible verses, prayers, and long rambling messages, all scrawled in black ink. Some of the words were crossed out. rewritten over and over until they became thick, angry slashes. In the center, one phrase was written bigger than all the others. No salvation on a Sunday. I checked my watch. 55 minutes left. I moved cautiously deeper into the house. The kitchen was filled with shattered dishes and something worse. Stacks of rotted papers, each one with the same phrase written again and again. Repent or burn. I started to feel watched, like the walls themselves were leaning in, breathing against my skin. Suddenly I heard a noise, a dragging sound, from upstairs. My flashlight flickered. For a second, I swore I saw a shadow at the top of the staircase. Tall, stooped, moving. I should have left right then. But the thought of my friends laughing at me, calling me a coward, kept me frozen in place. I took a step toward the stairs. The moment my foot hit the first step, a whisper drifted down. Not from upstairs, from the walls. You came on a Sunday. The steps groaned as I climbed, each one feeling weaker, less real. At the top, there was a long hallway lined with doors. Every door was closed, except one. At the far end, it was open just a crack, and faint candlelight flickered inside. I moved toward it, heart hammering in my chest. As I got closer, I noticed deep scratches on the wood floors, as if something had been dragged, struggling. The door swung wider on its own. The room inside was almost bare, except for an altar made of broken furniture, candles melting into puddles of wax, and a mirror nailed to the far wall. And sitting in front of the mirror, a figure. It wore a preacher's coat, stained and torn. Its head was bowed, hands clasped in prayer. But its skin was wrong, gray and sagging, like a dried-out corpse. It whispered, voice cracking, "No salvation on a Sunday." The figure raised its head, and in the mirror I saw its face. It wasn't just dead. It was me. I stumbled back, slamming into the doorframe. The figure stood up, impossibly tall now, its arms too long, its head lolling side to side. It moved toward me, mouth stretching into a grin far too wide for any human face. I turned and ran. The hallway stretched longer with every step, the doors on either side slamming open, revealing more figures, all dressed in preacher's clothes, all with rotted faces, all whispering in unison, "No salvation, no salvation, no salvation." I finally found the stairs. I didn't walk. I threw myself down them, hitting the bottom hard enough to knock the wind out of me. Through the haze, I saw the front door, wide open. Salvation. I sprinted. Just as I reached the porch, something grabbed the back of my shirt, yanking me so hard my feet left the ground. I twisted, swinging the flashlight wildly. For a split second, the light caught it. The preacher's face, stitched together from dozens of other faces. Eyes sewn shut. Mouths muttering. Still reaching for me. I ripped free, stumbled off the porch, and sprinted down the dirt road without looking back. My friends found me half a mile away, curled up on the side of the road, sobbing and shaking. I never went near the Sunday house again. No one did. A week later, I woke up to find an envelope on my front porch. No stamp, no address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in the same black handwriting from the walls of the Sunday house. Only this time, it wasn't sermons. It was just one sentence, repeated over and over. "You came on a Sunday." And at the bottom, scrawled in thicker ink, barely legible, "Now you belong to the house." Some nights when the wind is just right, I swear I can hear it. The whisper. Coming from the woods outside my window. Calling me back. Promising that my room is ready. I grew up in a tiny dead-end town where the only thing to do was get into trouble. The worst of it usually happened during summer. Long nights, empty streets, and nowhere to go except the woods or the old cemetery. Everyone knew about Elder Hollow Cemetery. It was ancient, founded sometime in the 1800s, and most of the graves were cracked, overgrown, or just outright forgotten. The whole place smelled like wet dirt and rust, and after dark, it felt like the ground itself was breathing. One night, me and my friends, Connor, Jared, and Blake, decided to pull the ultimate dare. Grave digging. Not for real, we told ourselves. Just scrape the surface of an old grave, spook ourselves, and brag about it later. But we picked the wrong grave. And it didn't stay buried. It was about 11:30 p.m. when we hopped the iron fence and made our way to the far corner of the cemetery. We picked a grave almost at random. A crumbling headstone leaning to one side, so worn down that we couldn't even read the name. The date was still clear, though. 1823. Almost 200 years old. Connor brought a couple of shovels, stolen from his dad's shed. We set to work, laughing at how stupid we were, how we'd be legends at school. The soil was surprisingly loose, almost soft, like it had been dug recently. About 2 feet down, Blake's shovel hit something hard. Not a coffin, not wood, something stone. He cleared more dirt, revealing what looked like a small flat slab, covered in strange carvings, symbols we couldn't recognize. It didn't look like any grave marker. It looked older. Before any of us could say anything, Jared leaned down and knocked on the stone like it was a door. "Anybody home?" he joked. The ground shuddered, only for a second, like a ripple under our feet. We all jumped back. The laughter died immediately. Connor dropped his shovel. Blake muttered, "We need to go." I agreed, but it was already too late. As we grabbed our stuff and stumbled back toward the fence, the air changed. Thick, heavy, like breathing through a soaked blanket. The headstones around us seemed to shift when we weren't looking, tilting, stretching taller. And then we heard it. Thump, thump. Slow, deliberate steps behind us. But when we turned around, no one. Nothing. Just the open grave behind us, and a low, wet sound coming from inside it, like something dragging itself through mud. We ran. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. The thump of something heavy moving closer. The scrape of wet earth. At around 3 a.m., I got a text from Connor. "Is someone outside your window too?" I didn't even check. I stayed curled under the covers, pretending I hadn't read it. I thought it would pass. It didn't. The next morning, Jared didn't show up for school. Neither did Blake. Connor and I looked at each other, pale and wide-eyed. I told myself they were just sick, freaked out. Until the news hit. 2 missing persons reports. No signs of forced entry. No struggle. The only thing found at Blake's house was a trail of muddy footprints leading from the backyard to his window. Footprints that ended inside his room. And on Jared's pillow, the police found something even worse. A handful of fresh cemetery dirt. I decided to come clean. I told my parents everything. They thought I was on drugs. That night, I locked every door and window. Slept with the lights on. Still, just after 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of tapping. At my window. I live on the 2nd floor. I stared, frozen, as the tapping grew louder, more frantic. Scratching now. Slowly, against my better judgment, I turned toward the window. There, pressed against the glass, was a face. Bloated. Gray. Mouth hanging open. black mud spilling from between broken teeth. It grinned and whispered, "You knocked." I screamed, ran out of the house barefoot, didn't even stop to grab my phone. I ran all the way back to Elder Hollow Cemetery. Something told me it had to end where it started. I didn't even need a flashlight. The grave was easy to find. The soil was still torn up. The stone slab lay cracked in half. And where the grave had once been, a deep, endless hole. Something moved inside, slithering up the walls, clawing at the edges. I grabbed the shovels we'd left behind and started piling dirt back in, fast as I could, not even thinking. As I worked, I heard it climbing faster, closer. The air grew colder. My fingers went numb. Something brushed my ankle. I didn't look down. I just kept shoveling. Finally, when the last bit of dirt was back over the grave, the air shifted. The pressure lifted. The earth stopped trembling. I didn't stop to catch my breath. I ran home and collapsed inside, locking everything behind me. That was 2 months ago. Connor never came back. Neither did Jared or Blake. The official story was that they ran away. Police found their phones tossed into a river outside town. No further leads. But I know the truth. I see them sometimes, at the edge of the woods near the cemetery, standing still, watching, their faces blank, mouths dripping with black mud, waiting. And I hear it in my dreams. The knocking, the slow, wet thump of something buried too deep and pulled up too soon. All because we dug the wrong grave. Some things are meant to stay buried. Some names are meant to stay forgotten. And if you ever find yourself in an old cemetery, standing over a grave you can't quite read, don't knock. You might wake something that remembers you. It was supposed to be a dream anniversary getaway. Eric and I loved old places, antique shops, dusty museums, old lighthouses. So when we found the Willowmere Inn listed on a random travel blog, tucked way out in the New England countryside, it felt perfect. Secluded, peaceful, dripping in history. The kind of place where nothing bad could happen. Or so we thought. We pulled up just before dusk. The inn looked like it had been plucked from a ghost story. Creaky porch, sagging shutters, ivy climbing up the faded siding. Mrs. Alcott, the innkeeper, was waiting for us on the porch, smiling like she hadn't seen people in a long time. "You're our only guest this weekend," she said warmly, handing over an old brass key. "Breakfast is at 8. Make yourselves at home." I joked to Eric under my breath. "Feels like we rented a haunted house," he grinned. "As long as the ghosts don't charge extra." I laughed then. Not so much later. Our room was cozy. Room 3. Up a narrow staircase and down a long hall lined with old paintings. The 4-poster bed took up most of the space, and lace curtains fluttered over a tiny window, looking out into the woods. After we settled in, we decided to explore the inn a little. The hallway smelled like old wood and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. Most of the paintings were stiff portraits of people in black clothes and grim expressions. But one, hanging directly across from our door, caught my eye. It showed a man in a black suit, pale face, dark hollow eyes, and something was wrong with the painting. Like the artist couldn't get him to stay still. The edges around him were blurred. No nameplate, no date. "Maybe that's Mr. Willowmere," Eric joked. I laughed, and I swear I heard someone else laugh too. Software raspy, from the far end of the hall. I froze. Eric heard it too. His grin faded. We locked our door tight when we went back inside. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up suddenly. The house was silent except for the ticking of a grandfather clock somewhere downstairs. As my eyes adjusted, I saw it. The shape. Someone was standing just outside our open bedroom door. Tall. Still. Watching. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't scream. The figure turned silently and vanished down the hall. I finally found my voice and shook Eric awake. He jumped out of bed, grabbed the flashlight, and checked the hallway. Empty. We locked the door again. I barely slept the rest of the night. The next morning, over coffee and pancakes, I worked up the nerve to ask Mrs. Alcott, "Did anyone else check in last night?" She gave me a puzzled look. "No, dear. You're our only guess." I didn't know what to say after that. Before we left for a hike, I asked about the portrait, the man outside our room. Mrs. Alcott's face darkened. "That," she said carefully, "is someone we don't speak about." No explanation, no smile. We left quickly. That second night, the rain hammered the windows. Around midnight, we heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, moving up and down the hall outside our door. Eric peered out the peephole. Nothing. Then came the whisper, right outside the door. "Forgotten. Forgotten. Forgotten." The lights flickered. The doorknob rattled violently, like someone was trying to force their way in. Eric jammed a chair under the knob while I clutched the flashlight. The battery sputtered and died immediately. We sat on the bed, holding each other, listening to the footsteps circle again and again. Forgotten. Forgotten. They didn't stop. They didn't fade. They just kept going. By morning, it was dead silent. When we opened the door, muddy footprints led from our threshold straight into the wall across the hall. Into the wall where the portrait hung. Only now the portrait had changed. The man in the painting was smiling. And in his hand, he held a brass key. Our brass key. Room 3. We didn't wait for breakfast. We didn't even say goodbye. We packed and left without looking back. As Eric drove, I checked the Willowmere Inn's website, desperate for some rational explanation. At the bottom of the About page, almost like an afterthought, was a line. "Dedicated to Jonathan Vance, original owner, who vanished within these walls. His room remains forever empty. Room 3. Weeks later, we got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid photograph. It showed the upstairs hallway at the Willowmere Inn. Our door, room 3, slightly ajar. And just visible through the crack was a pale hand reaching out. Scrawled on the back, in shaky handwriting, "Forgotten. But not for long." We moved apartments shortly after, but sometimes late at night, I wake to the sound of heavy footsteps pacing just outside our door. And once last week, I found a brass key on our nightstand. No note, just the key. Waiting. It happened 2 years ago when I was living alone in a small apartment. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it was cheap, and I didn't have many other options. My sleep schedule was a mess back then. I was always exhausted, barely getting a few hours of rest each night. One evening, I collapsed onto my bed after a long shift at work, barely remembering to set my alarm before drifting off. But when I woke up, something felt wrong. I was awake, but I couldn't move. My breathing was shallow, my body stiff as a corpse. The familiar weight of sleep paralysis pressed down on me, making it impossible to even twitch a finger. My eyes darted around the dimly lit room, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then I saw it, a shadow in the corner of my room. At first I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, just another hallucination. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't just a shadow. It was something else, something watching me. The thing was hunched in the corner, its body unnaturally thin, almost stretched. It had long, bony arms that curled around its knees, and its head was tilted at a disturbing angle. But what horrified me the most was its face. It was grinning. A wide, unnatural grin that shouldn't have been possible. The smile stretched far too wide, its teeth jagged and gleaming in the dim light. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were black, empty pits that bored into me. It wasn't just watching me. It was waiting. I wanted to scream, to bolt out of bed and run, but I was completely paralyzed. My throat felt like it was closing up, my lungs burning as I struggled to breathe. And then, it moved. Slowly, its long fingers twitched, and its head snapped to the side, like it had just noticed something new. Me. I felt its attention shift. A deep, twisting dread curled in my stomach. Then, it stood up. The movement was unnatural, like a marionette being yanked by invisible strings. It unfolded itself from the corner, its limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. And then, with excruciating slowness, it started to crawl toward me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was watch as this smiling thing crept closer, its fingers dragging along the floor, its grin growing wider and wider. It reached the foot of my bed and stopped. For a few horrible moments, it just crouched there, tilting its head back and forth, as if studying me. Then, it started to climb onto the bed, its hands pressed into the mattress, its weight shifting as it crawled over me. I felt the sheets pull and stretch under its weight. It lowered its face to mine. Its breath was hot and rancid, smelling of something rotten. Its lips twitched, as if it was trying to speak, but no sound came out, just a wet, choking noise. And then, it whispered, "Let me in." The moment those words reached my ears, I felt a sudden, crushing force on my chest, like something was pushing down on me, trying to sink into my skin. A violent shudder racked my entire body. My vision blurred, my ears rang, and just when I thought I was about to die, I woke up. I jerked upright, gasping for air. My body was drenched in sweat, my sheets tangled around me. The room was empty, but the corner where it had been, it looked darker than before. I turned on every light in my apartment and stayed up until the sun rose. I tried to convince myself it was just a dream, just another sleep paralysis episode. I even looked it up online, reading about hallucinations and tricks of the mind. But deep down, I knew. I knew what I saw. And I knew it was real. For a while, nothing happened. I forced myself into a strict sleep schedule. Did everything I could to avoid another episode. But 2 weeks later, it happened again. I woke up in the middle of the night, frozen, heart pounding, and I knew it was there. I didn't want to look, but my eyes were already locked onto the corner of my room. And sure enough, it was there, smiling at me. Only this time, it wasn't just crouching in the corner. It was standing beside my bed, so much closer than before. I don't remember much after that. Just a horrible, suffocating feeling, and the sensation of something touching my forehead. When I woke up, there was a deep bruise on my skin, like fingers had pressed into me. I don't know what it was. I don't know why it chose me, but I knew one thing. It wasn't a dream. I moved out of that apartment a month later. I left the state, got as far away as I could. I haven't had sleep paralysis since, but I still have nightmares. And sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I can still feel it watching me, still waiting, still smiling. I appreciate you sticking around until the end. Leave a comment letting me know what stories you'd like to hear next. Until next time, occultists.